Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. This is the second hour of this Monday edition of Focal Point on the American Family Radio Talk Network. Wanted to comment on the pro-life issue to show you kind of the skullduggery to which secular fundamentalists pro-death crowd will resort. This is a story out of New York from Friday. There was a pro-life bill. This was on June 28, actually, so a week ago Friday. There were deliberations going on in the New York State Senate on a pro-life bill. And the Democrats wanted to, it was a pro-abortion bill, actually, that they wanted to pass. Now, the problem they had is there was a Democratic senator who is a social conservative. His name is Simcha Felder. He's an Orthodox Jew. He's a Democrat, but he is a social conservative, and he caucuses with the Republicans. Now, what the Democrats tried to do that day, they did not want this guy to vote on this bill because they knew he would vote pro-life, and it was going to gum up the plans that they had. And so they tried to delay the bill long enough on Friday, the vote on the bill, they tried to delay it long enough on Friday that he would have to leave for Sabbath to be home by the time the sun went down. Remember, for an observant Jew, the Sabbath begins at sundown on Friday. When the sun goes down on Friday, that's when the Sabbath begins. It's not over until the sun goes down on Saturday. And so they were hoping that they could ace this guy out of even being able to vote by just delaying the vote long enough that he would finally have to leave so he could get home by sundown, because they're not supposed to travel on the Sabbath. So that was the length to which they were trying to go. Now, this Orthodox Jew consulted with his rabbi and said, look, when you're dealing with an abortion piece of legislation, that is a matter of life and death, and therefore you are compelled, he says, to stay and cast a vote for life. So when he found out he was going to stay, they finally had the vote at about 4:30, and sure enough, they did not get the votes that they needed to pass. Now, back to the immigration issue. Let's go down to clip number 6, Rob, if we can. President Obama has had two major legislative agendas or aims or goals for this second term. One was was amnesty, and the second one, what was the second one? I've just gone blank on what the second one was. Anyway, I'll think of it here in a second. But one of them was amnesty. That's one of the two major things. The other one's already been torpedoed, and the immigration one is in. I'm having my Rick Perry moment here, and I'm only trying to think of two things. He was trying to think of three. Anyway, this immigration thing looks like it's in bad shape. The Senate bill is DOA over on the House. Everybody has said that. And now here's NBC's Chuck Todd, and this was a big deal for Obama. He's hanging kind of his legacy on getting these two things done. Healthcare is a complete disaster. We got sound bites in the second segment that I'll play you, show the complete disaster. I'm just referring to it as Chernobyl care now. I'm not even referring to it as Obamacare. It's Chernobyl care. The whole thing is a complete, absolute meltdown right now. And I cannot think of what that other one was. Anyway, it'll come to me, I'm sure, probably in the middle of the night tonight. Anyway, even President Obama now and the White House is realizing, look, it's going to be tough to get immigration done. This amnesty thing is one of the major legislative purposes, and the House stands in the way. Here's NBC's Chuck Todd talking about the fact that the White House is getting realistic about what may or may not happen with immigration. Let's listen.
White House, now they had been so confident that they were going to sign immigration reform this year. For the first time, I'm hearing that there is some doubt seeping in, that they think that maybe the House won't act. What they need is they need something to sort of force Boehner to, like, at the last minute, bring it to the floor the same way that the fiscal cliff deal happened. The problem is there's no trigger at the end of this year. There isn't the end of this Congress. There isn't this. So I don't know how by the end of this year, and suddenly now the White House doesn't see a path to how this happens.
Right. Fires all around them, no real second-term agenda when they have to deal with all these problems.
And immigration was going to be the one thing that they could have pointed to, and I think that conversation with John Boehner and the president doesn't have a whole well of trust in Boehner saying, hang with me, I can get this done by the end of the summer. Boehner still doesn't have the support, and you heard what Congressman Labrador has been saying. They don't have a Marco Rubio on the House side who can try to work around the edges and bring it together.
It was supposed to be Paul Ryan giving it.
But he's gone silent.
So Paul Ryan's supposed to be the guy to carry this amnesty bill in the House, and nobody's heard from him. I think he's realizing that he stepped in it on amnesty. That's not where the base is at whatsoever. And Chuck Todd saying, look, there is doubt creeping in to the White House. And he says, I don't see how this happens at the end of this year. And suddenly the White House doesn't see a path. So, again, we've got 2.5 of the 3 branches of Congress are completely in the hands of secular fundamentalists who are lawless, not bound by the Constitution. The only part of we only have half of one of the 3 branches of government that is at all remotely sensitive to the law, to common sense, and the Constitution, and that is the House of Representatives. Now, here is Raul Labrador from my home state of Idaho. I did some Tea Party events with Raul when we were back in Idaho. And he's Puerto Rican. He's an immigration attorney. So he's kind of a go-to guy over on the House side. And he's pulled out of the House negotiations. He's pulled out of that thing because they're going amnesty, and he thinks border security needs to be issue number 1. So here he is with David Gregory on Meet the Press, clip 1. Let's listen.
You know, I hope we're going to get a bill. I think immigration reform is necessary. As you know, I have been negotiating on immigration reform now for some time. But my concern with the Senate bill is that they put the legalization of 11 million people ahead of security. The legalization happens first, and then the security happens second. And I think the American people are not going to stand for that. In fact, if you look at this Obamacare debacle that they have right now, this administration is actually deciding when and where to actually enforce the law. And that's what some of us in the House are concerned about. If you give to this administration the authority to decide when they're going to enforce the law, how they're going to enforce the law, and you tell them that it's okay if they decide if there's going to be 20,000 troops or if there's going to be, 20,000 Border Patrol agents, or they get to determine when the border is secure, I can tell you that Janet Napolitano has already said that the border is secure. So what's going to happen is that we're going to give legalization to 11 million people, and Janet Napolitano is going to come to Congress and tell us that the border is already secure and nothing else needs to happen.
So that's Raul Labrador. Again, this guy's Hispanic, born in Puerto Rico, born as an American citizen. So he's an American citizen, didn't have to immigrate because that's a territory or Commonwealth or whatever, and he's born an American citizen. But he says, look, the problem with the immigration bill that's on the table is it's legalization first, and that comes ahead of security. The legalization happens first, and then the security happens second. And he says, look, you look at what's going on with Chernobyl care, with what's going on with Obamacare. Here you have a president is deciding which parts of the law he is going to enforce and which ones he won't, as if he has the right, has the constitutional authority to decide what part of the law he's going to uphold. And so Representative Labrador's point is, hey, if he feels he has the right to decide what parts of the law he's going to enforce, what good is it going to do to pass a law that requires him to put 20,000 Border Patrol agents on the border? If he just doesn't feel like doing it, he won't do it. So what's the point? Focal Point, AFR Talk, back in 2. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace.